In this video, we're counting down 15 reasons why 70s kids were built differently. Number 1. No smartphones, no problem. Remember when making plans with your friends required actual commitment? Before smartphones took over our lives, kids in the 70s had to actually remember things. Like your friend's phone number? That was committed to memory, no contacts list to save you. And that house phone was usually attached to the wall with a cord that never quite reached far enough. When you wanted to hang out with friends, you'd make solid plans during school or the last time you saw each other. Meet at the park at 3 o'clock meant exactly that. And you'd better be there, because there was no way to call or text if you were running late. If someone didn't show up, you either waited or assumed they weren't coming. Talk about learning punctuality the hard way. Number 2. The go outside and play mentality. Those navigation skills came in handy because 70s kids weren't just wandering around their own yards, they were roaming free across entire neighborhoods. Did you know children in the 1970s spent an astonishing 3 to 4 hours outside every day? Compare that to today's average of just 30 minutes, and you'll understand why an entire generation developed differently. Go outside and play wasn't just something parents said to get some peace and quiet, though that was definitely a bonus. This daily outdoor freedom was practically mandatory. Rain wasn't an excuse to stay inside, it was an invitation to splash in puddles. Snow meant sledding adventures, not canceled plans. This weather-related play actually taught kids resilience and adaptability they couldn't learn any other way. Number 3. Limited safety precautions. The physical toughness 70s kids developed wasn't just from playing outdoors, it came from surviving daily activities that would give modern parents panic attacks. Think about this. In the 70s, family road trips meant babies perched on mom's lap in the front seat while toddlers stood freely on the passenger seat. There wasn't even a thought about car seats. The concept was just beginning to emerge, but wouldn't become standard practice until years later. Safety equipment? What safety equipment? Swimming pools existed in neighborhoods without a fence in sight. When was the last time you saw a kid riding a bike without a helmet? In the 70s, that was just called riding a bike. Protective headgear wasn't part of the equation. And those backyard trampolines? They were just metal frames with a bouncy surface, no nets, no padding, just pure aerial freedom with concrete or hard ground waiting below. Number 4. No helicopter parents. The boundary testing wasn't just physical, it was social too. What if I told you that the absence of parental intervention in childhood conflicts actually created more resilient adults? If you came home from school in the 70s complaining about a mean teacher or a playground dispute, you'd likely hear, "Figure it out yourself," instead of witnessing your parents storm into the principal's office demanding justice. This hands-off approach extended to academics as well. Parents typically checked on their child's progress just twice a year, during report card time and parent-teacher conferences. The daily homework supervision and constant teacher communication that's standard practice today would have seemed bizarrely excessive back then. No signing reading logs, no checking assignment portals, no emailing teachers about missed homework. Number 5. The playground was a war zone. While solving their own social conflicts, 70s kids were simultaneously conquering physical dangers that would make today's parents call their lawyers. Those playgrounds weren't just places to hang out, they were testing grounds for survival skills. Metal slides literally burned skin on summer days, teaching the painful lesson that touching equipment before sitting down was non-negotiable. Merry-go-rounds spun at dizzying speeds with nothing to prevent children from being flung yards away, while jungle gyms towered over hard concrete surfaces that waited unforgivingly for any fall. The rusty bolts, exposed metal joints, and splintering wooden platforms weren't design flaws. They were just part of the everyday obstacle course. Surprisingly, there was method in this madness. Navigating these hazardous environments forced children to develop crucial skills they'd carry into adulthood. They learned to test their physical limits carefully, judge heights accurately, and understand exactly what their bodies could handle. Number 6. Televisions were limited. Beyond those dangerous playgrounds was another world of scarcity that shaped 70s childhoods in profound ways. While today's kids scroll through endless streaming options, 70s children faced a television landscape that's practically unimaginable now. Just 3 channels and a single family TV that everyone had to share. Think about this. If your favorite show aired Tuesday at 8 p.m. and you missed it, that was it. No recording, no streaming, no second chance until reruns months later. This wasn't just inconvenient. It taught an entire generation how to prioritize what truly mattered to them and plan accordingly. With the whole family crowded around that single television set, kids learned crucial negotiation skills as they debated what to watch during prime time. Number 7. Riding bikes everywhere. Those entertainment-starved 70s kids didn't just find freedom through limited television, they found it on 2 wheels. Your bicycle wasn't merely transportation, it was your first taste of true independence. While today's parents track their children's every move on smartphone apps, 70s kids regularly vanished for entire days, exploring territories 4 times larger than modern children are allowed to roam. The freedom came with built-in lessons. Without helmets or protective gear, safety wasn't enforced through equipment but through experience. A skinned knee taught you to take that corner more carefully next time. No one handed you a manual for this education. You learned by doing, falling, and trying again. Number 8. Walk to school, and often alone. That natural physical resilience wasn't just limited to bike adventures, it extended to the daily trek to school. In the 1970s, first and second graders as young as 6 regularly navigated to school completely on their own, crossing busy intersections and railroad tracks without any adult supervision. Today, this independence would likely trigger concerned calls to authorities, but back then, it was just Tuesday morning. The journey wasn't optional regardless of weather conditions. Rain meant trudging through puddles, winter meant breaking through snowdrifts, and summer meant arriving with sweat-soaked clothes. This daily expedition taught serious time management skills. If you left home too late, you'd face the consequences of tardiness without the safety net of a parent's excuse note. Number 9. Tougher games. While those unsupervised journeys to school might sound perilous, the real battleground of the 1970s awaited kids at recess. Forget today's carefully monitored playground activities. 70s children engaged in games that essentially functioned as organized collision sports. Remember Red Rover? That game where kids would literally sprint full force trying to break through a human chain of linked arms? Or how about Crack the Whip, where the unfortunate child at the end of the line would go airborne as the human chain made a sharp turn? These weren't just games. They were unofficial training grounds for toughness. Dodgeball wasn't the sanitized version played today. It was a high-velocity rubber ball aimed directly at your face, teaching a simple lesson. When you get hit, you shake it off and keep playing. The unfortunately named Smear the Queer involved one player running with a ball while everyone else attempted to tackle them to the ground. A game that wouldn't survive a minute in today's schoolyards. Number 10. No child-proof everything. That remarkable freedom didn't stop at the playground. It extended right into our homes, where danger lurked behind nearly every cabinet door. Modern parents wouldn't believe how 70s households operated without a single child-proof lock in sight. Medicine bottles had simple twist-off caps that little hands could easily open. Household chemicals like bleach and ammonia lived under kitchen sinks with regular doors. That bottle of whiskey, just sitting on the counter. Those power tools, right there in the garage where curious kids could reach them. Instead of physical barriers, 70s parents relied on something revolutionary: verbal warnings. "Don't touch that, it's dangerous," was considered sufficient protection. When kids inevitably tested these boundaries, they learned through experience rather than prevention. This approach wasn't about negligence. It was about teaching children to understand why certain items were off limits, rather than simply making them inaccessible. Number 11. Less structured schedules. While 70s parents believed in teaching safety through warnings rather than locks, They applied the same hands-off approach to something even more valuable: time itself. Those endless summer days were truly endless. 3 full months with nothing on the schedule but whatever a kid could dream up. Can you imagine a modern child having that much unstructured freedom? It simply doesn't exist anymore. Back in the 70s, after-school commitments meant maybe joining Little League or attending a weekly scout meeting. Compare that to today's kid shuttling between piano lessons, coding camp, travel soccer, and SAT prep, all before dinner. The modern child's Google Calendar looks busier than most executives. Number 12. Punk rock and a DIY attitude. The self-sufficient kids from the 70s weren't just surviving without hovering parents, they were creating an entire cultural revolution. That spirit of independence burst into something radical when the punk movement emerged. While parents clutched their pearls over safety pins through clothes and 3-chord songs, something extraordinary was happening. Teenagers were discovering they didn't need anyone's permission to create meaningful art and music. Did you know that many 70s teens formed influential bands, published their own magazines, and organized concerts without any formal training? The punk scene wasn't just about shocking haircuts and angry music. It was a masterclass in DIY problem-solving. Kids picked up guitars without lessons, published handmade zines filled with their thoughts and artwork, and created venues in abandoned buildings or basements. Number 13. Less overprotected and more free range. That freedom to tackle obstacles wasn't manufactured in classrooms, it was forged in the neighborhoods where 70s kids roamed freely without adult supervision. Did you know kindergartners and first graders would wander entire neighborhoods with no oversight whatsoever? This wasn't considered neglect, it was normal parenting. The parenting philosophy was simple: no news is good news. Parents simply assumed their children were fine unless they heard otherwise. This hands-off approach created the perfect environment for developing genuine independence that can't be taught in structured settings. Number 14. Endured a different kind of media. The psychological benefits of independence weren't the only forces shaping resilient 70 kids. When children finally came home for dinner, they faced another toughening agent waiting in the living room, a media landscape that would shock modern parents. Remember those terrifying public service announcements about nuclear war that played between your Saturday morning cartoons? Nothing says, "Enjoy your cereal," quite like a reminder that atomic annihilation could happen any minute. Children's entertainment itself wasn't exactly gentle either. The boat tunnel scene in Willy Wonka gave an entire generation nightmares, while movies like Watership Down presented disturbing imagery of wounded rabbits that would never make it into today's children's films. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a media environment that didn't believe in sugarcoating reality for young viewers. Number 15. Learn to handle disappointments. That era of unfiltered media wasn't the only thing teaching 70s kids resilience. A much tougher lesson was waiting on the playground, learning how to lose. Remember when winning actually meant something because not everyone got a trophy just for participating? Back in the 70s, competition had clear winners and losers, with no participation medals to cushion the blow of defeat. When you lost a game in the 70s, you walked home empty-handed while watching someone else celebrate victory. This stark reality existed before the participation trophy trend swept through children's activities in the late 1980s and 1990s. The message was clear: sometimes your best isn't enough to win, and that's okay.